working on a 2000 Subaru Legacy, the wagon with the 2.5. We are going to be doing a left front axle, so driver front. Here's the axle right here. We actually already changed it. As you can see, the inside boot was torn and all the grease came out and it started to make noise and vibrations, so we went in and we replaced it. This is a pretty easy job to do yourself. So here's some of the tools you're going to need. All we needed was a ratchet, a 12 millimeter, a 14 millimeter, a 19 wrench, a 32 for the axle nut. You're going to need a big flathead screwdriver or a pry bar, either one. We used a chisel, punch. I'm not sure on the exact size, but just a regular punch. You are going to want safety glasses because stuff is going to be falling out of the car, grease, little rust bits, so you are going to want to wear your safety glasses. You're going to need a hammer. We used an impact to take the tires off. The lug nut size was a 19, and the axle nut. But if you don't have an impact, you could always just loosen everything on the ground with like a breaker bar and then bring the car up. You're going to need a little bit of penetrating oil, and we used a little bit of grease to help reassemble everything. So that's all you're going to need. It's actually a pretty easy job. We're going to walk you guys through it, and pretty much anyone should be able to accomplish it. So we'll walk you through that now. Okay, so to begin, we're just going to jack the car up. I'm going to put the jack right on this cross member, and then we're going to put jack stands under the car. And now we're just going to place the jacks under the car. Alright, so to begin, you're going to want to remove the tire. If you didn't have impact on, you would want to loosen the lug nuts on the ground before you take them off. Alright, so we're going to remove the axle nut first. If you didn't have an impact, again, like the tire, you would want to loosen this before you take the car off the ground. You could actually pop out take the tire off, pop out the center part, and then you could fit the socket in there with the car on the ground and break it loose. But we're just going to use the impact to save time. There you go, your axle nut's off. To begin, we're just going to want to spray down these two bolts that go through the top of the knuckle in the shock. So we're going to spray those down because we're going to have to remove that. We're going to want to spray inside of where the axle goes. Spray in there. I'm going to try to remove this fastener that holds the ABS sensor wire. Try to remove that. If that doesn't work, you can try to loosen it from up there. I don't want to mess with the sensor itself just for the fear of breaking it, but we should have enough room if we just take that one off. Now I'm going to remove the caliper, just so that way we don't have it, we don't stretch the brake line or anything. So we're just going to take out the two screws that hold it on. There we go. And now we can just pull the caliper off. And next we're going to try to take off the ABS line bolt. Alright, so we're going to take that out. Sometimes when they're rusty like that, you can go back in and tighten them a little, and then loosen them. There we go. Now hopefully that should give us enough so this doesn't have any tension on it. Now we're going to take out the 2 bolts that hold the knuckle to the shock. You're going to want to remember that the bolts go through that way, because it is important you put them back on the same side, same way they came out. The 2 nuts came off, and it looks like this top one had a washer on it. The bottom one did not have a washer on it. Okay, so the top one has the washer. Now to get the top one out, we could try to, let me get a hammer. Okay, now to get the top one out, because it's a little stuck, I'm just going to thread the nut back on. Just a little bit. And just tap it out. That should be all we need. Let's take that one out. You are going to remember which one's the top and which one's the bottom. So just keep them organized. And then we're just going to take a big flathead. If you have a pry bar, that'll work too, and just pry the knuckle out of the shock. And then we could work on getting the axle out, which I am going to use I'm just going to use this punch, put it in the axle. There's like a little hole in it, and just tap the axle out through. And then we should be able to pull the axle over to the side. Try to keep your caliper from hanging on the hose best you can. You could use a bungee, but it's kind of hard in this case because we want to put the axle on this side. So I just kind of flipped it there so there's no tension. And now we're going to want to go underneath, and there's actually going to be a roll pin. Let me get a new one and show you. Okay, there's actually going to be a roll pin, one of these. The axle comes with one, but you're just going to want to take that same punch, and you're going to just punch it and push the old pin out, and then the axle should just slide right out once you get that pin. Subaru uses this style, but some other car manufacturers don't use this, but today we're going to just push that out. There. Okay, so now we're gonna push out the roll pin. If the roll pin isn't lined up, you could actually spin the other tire, and the other tire will spin this axle, but ours is right here, so we're just gonna want to tap it out. As you can hear, the roll pin came out. That's all it is. And now your axle should be free and is going to come out just like that. Okay, and now you're going to want to put your axle back on, but you're going to want to make sure you line up the roll pin hole, which is kind of a trial and error process if you're by yourself. So you got to kind of put it in, come back over here, and kind of see where you're at. Now we're going to line up that hole right there. See, just like that. And now we're going to want to take that pin and the hammer, and we're going to want to just put the pin back in. Which is easier said than done sometimes, but it is doable. I'm gonna hold it just like that. Try something like this. Get it started. And then you could begin to drive it in. Getting it started is probably the hardest part. And you just want it to sit flush like that. You don't want to hit it more in, you just want it to sit nice and flat. So on the other side, it should be nice and flat as well. So now we just reassemble the knuckle and everything, and then you're all set. Now to begin reassembly, I like to put a little bit of grease on this end of the axle, so next time you go to take it off, hopefully it shouldn't be stuck. So we put a little bit of grease. Now move your caliper back out of the way. You're gonna want to just turn the axle until it goes in, and just kind of wiggle and shake until it catches. And make sure you do compare your parts and everything is the same before you put it back together. Now we're gonna just put the knuckle back in the top. And you're gonna want to make sure this one was on the top. These are actually alignment bolts, so these do affect alignment, so that might be something you would want to consider after a job like this. But just get it started. And the bottom one, just get started. Sometimes you might have to push it a little bit to line up the holes like that, or sometimes you could use a small screwdriver and move the other side while you put the bolt in. But that's all we had to do in this case. And if you remember, the top one had the washer, the bottom one didn't. The nuts are the same, so it doesn't matter which nut. So we're just going to put those back on. Then you're just going to want to tighten those up. Tight enough. Make sure your axle is still in good. Okay. Now, our back brake pad fell out, but we're just gonna put him back in. Now next step is going to be to take your new nut. Don't reuse your old nut because as you see we're going to have to stake it in place. So if it comes with a new one, don't reuse the old. So we're going to put the new on. And make sure it's catching the threads. You don't want to cross thread this because then you make junk of the whole axle. Now we're just going to tighten this up. You don't want to over tighten it, but you don't want it to come loose. So that should be tight enough. Now I'm going to grab a chisel and we're going to stake the nut in place so it can't back off. Now with the chisel, right inside that little groove, you're going to want to stake it down in place so the nut can't back off. Now we're going to turn to our caliper. We're going to put him back on. Put his bolts back in. Okay, and then we're just going to want to put back the screw for the ABS cable here. Make sure you get it started. He's on there good and tight. There he is. And okay, that's it. You successfully changed an axle. It's a pretty doable job to do yourself. 9 times out of 10 the axle won't be stuck, but if it is, you could kind of get behind it with like a chisel and kind of tap it out. But other than that, it's a pretty straightforward job. Just watch your hoses and watch your cables. Make sure nothing has a lot of tension on it. And now all we got to do is put the tire back on.